In 1607, citizens of England migrated to Virginia. Most had other settlers pay for their passage over in return for working their land as indentured servants. The majority of all settlers worked as indentured servants, and their labor typically lasted around 7 years. Funding mainly came from growing tobacco, which was their main export. The workers were mainly unskilled and illiterate, which made farming the most common job. The climate was warm and stayed in that condition longer than other regions, which expanded the farming period and enriched the soil. The long periods of warmth brought bouts of illness and diseases. Mosquitoes spread malaria, and sickness became the leading cause of death. In England, farming season did not last as long as it did in Virginia, and the dropping temperatures in their winter were harsh and kept the illnesses at bay. The starting population in Virginia had been 3,500 people and dropped to 700 around 10 years later. Both men and women worked the land, although the ratio of women to men was 1 to 4 and in some areas 1 to 6. Some men and women were kidnapped and sold to work. Slavery was not a new concept to English, who had had slaves before on their original land. Slavery was, however, illegal in Virginia. Very few men were over the age of 25, and because of the shortage of women, Virginia was not family-oriented. Virginia also was not heavily religiously based. Settlers were not expected to believe in the same gods, but were compelled into attending religious ceremonies and/or rituals. Later, English settlers moved to New England with religion being their main purpose. They wished to convert the Native Americans who resided in the area and serve God's will where they could be free of temptation. Because the English settlers moved for bettering themselves in their religion instead of work, like in Virginia, the citizens migrated with their relatives and families. These proportions were the highest in the history of American immigration, David Fisher wrote. In England, family units were common, and so their values did not change once they settled in New England. Unlike Virginia, not everyone was allowed to settle in New England, and only young men without property did not join the church. Very few young men lived in New England, though, with almost half being over the age of 25 or younger than 16. Here in New England, there were more women there than there were men, with the ratio in any given area being 150 males for every 100 females. It is said that many Puritans brought their husbands to New England with them. The majority of men there were considered elite. Literacy rates were high, and a large portion of them were scholars, scientists, and artists. Many were craftsmen and artisans. The settlers had connections with the Dutch and traded with them often. The minorities of settlers were workers and servants, seeing as the majority of Englishmen and women who migrated to Virginia were considered middle class. Farming was not popular in New England, and the brutal, cold weather tended to make it a tedious task to take on. Though they were used to slavery in England, the land had little to no need for the servitude. The cold weather also kept the sicknesses that raged through Virginia away from them. Despite religion, they were highly influenced by culture and architecture as well. The history of these two migrations are noted as different because of the routes the settlers came from. The main difference between the two being religion, family life, literacy, and source of income. Spawning from different regions of England, the settlers of New England and Virginia were brought up with different values and beliefs, which they took with them in their settlement to the Chesepeake colonies.